Conversations about housing affordability in the DC region go back long before I became county executive. Most recently, the county passed the so-called More Housing Now package, which will allow development of duplexes, triplexes, and apartments along corridors throughout the county. Behind this bill is a second proposal coming from Park and Planning that takes the More Housing Now and essentially puts it on steroids, and it expands it into the interior of the neighborhoods with even fewer protections than this bill has. The addition in the More Housing Now legislation of a large number of new roads being called corridors vastly expands where this expansion can occur throughout the county. It is far more than was anticipated in the Thrive Plan. Continuing as they've done recently, this is all being done outside of the master plan process, despite the fact that the council had assured the communities that the recommendations of the Thrive General Plan would have to go through the master planning process. Apparently, there will be no master planning process, and community input is minimal, as the folks in Four Corners recently experienced. The planning department is simply telling people what they plan to do, and there's no role for the community in this process. As someone who understands how master plans were done in this county historically, and having actually served on a committee that was created by the executive, I know what these plans are supposed to look like and how they're supposed to work. I can assure you that what the planning board and the council are doing now has nothing in common with how we've traditionally engaged our communities. In fact, it couldn't be farther from how we used to engage our communities. Citizens, businesses, developers were brought together along with planners as assistants, and to look at their communities and to determine where's the best opportunities for growth and what their communities would look like. Things are actually passed by votes and then set forward to the council and to the planning board. To be blunt, if this passes, no homeowner or prospective home buyer or renter will have any assurance that the master plan for their neighborhood can be relied on. If the planning board and council can change these neighborhoods without following a master plan process, then this can happen anywhere. It's sad to see the disregard for community engagement, particularly when it affects one of the most important decisions that a homeowner makes. People tend to see their investments not just as an investment in a house, but also an investment in a community with expectations for what that community is going to be like, particularly in terms of livability. If they wanted to live in an urban center, there are places in our county, let alone in the region, where they could have opted for that. Our goal as a county government and a community should be to ensure that our planning meets our needs and increases our housing supply directly and efficiently. Changing our community through zoning text amendments and destroying the planning process is not the way to meet our community needs, and it has virtually nothing to do with providing for affordable housing. The rhetoric behind this legislation is just a fig leaf for what is actually an effort to facilitate a certain group of developers to buy up property on the edges of and internally to neighborhoods and change the character of these neighborhoods with no intention of addressing affordability beyond our minimal requirements. What is most egregious in this is the way this is being touted as addressing the missing middle housing. There is truly a national shortage of affordable housing, and that includes our county. But the jurisdictions which are embracing this movement away from single-family zoning are primarily cities that are completely built out and have very little options of raw land that is available for development. So it's understandable, whether it's Minneapolis, Brooklyn, or Arlington, that they are looking at how they can address the need and desire to accommodate growth. The problem with the proponents' reasoning is that they're picking a model from communities that are built-out cities, while Montgomery County is not a mature city, nor is it a built-out suburb with no place to add housing. We are not fully built out or even close to built out. In fact, when the Council of Governments weighed in on how our county could deal with future growth and the additional units that we were supposed to have to accommodate, they also pointed out that we've already planned for that future in our master plans and that our capacity to grow exceeds the growth projections for us through 2050. Our plans already allow for more than 85,000 units to be built in areas that have been planned for growth. Not suburban small, but more compact centers that bring housing, businesses, and transportation together. We used to call it smart growth. In addition to those 85,000 units, there are over 30,000 units that have already been approved, where the developer can simply build anytime they decide to pull their permits. Why does this matter? It matters because The combined total represents 115,000 units that could accommodate over 280,000 future residents without touching any existing neighborhood. In short, it's unnecessary to rezone existing neighborhoods to accommodate future growth because we already created space in our county for that growth. In short, we do not lack for the necessary zoning to address growth. If the planning board is concerned, then they should start by looking at our existing plans. Looking at what we've planned for would have been a good place to start. These communities are typically planned to be denser than our older neighborhoods. This is where development should go and where it's zoned to go. Abandoning this approach and trying to force the growth into existing neighborhoods actually undermines the planned growth in these communities. There are a finite number of people coming to the county, and if they don't go to the places that we've already planned for and they wind up in these neighborhoods, then the places we planned to be activity centers will not be able to mature. What's not being built, unless the county requires it, is affordable housing. This is the real problem we face, regardless of whether it's more housing now or our existing plans. Our problem is the lack of affordable housing. But more housing now would actually produce fewer units of affordable housing than the master plan growth areas would. The zoning changes passed by the council do nothing to address this. The zoning changes will further exacerbate racial disparities in where people are able to live. Montgomery County has had the foresight to zone for future growth that is embedded in our master plans. We have more zone capacity than is needed or expected to be needed by 2050. Some people are opportunistically jumping into this national discussion, distorting our reality and conflating it with jurisdictions that have very different problems than we do. This week, I invited two professors to my media briefing to discuss the affordable housing situation. Their work through Vanderbilt University Law School analyzes the zoning policies that purport to address the housing crisis. Before we jump to the conversation I had with Ganesh Sitaraman and Christopher Sirkin, let me tell you a little bit about what else is going on in the county this week.